place where everything happened. Most everybody worked there. That's where everybody shopped. That's where you socialized. They were just great, busy, interactive places. Then in the 1950s, 1960s, something bad started happening to downtowns across the country. When I was watching this happen in my own hometown, I didn't quite know what was going on, but when I got older and started paying attention to it, I realized that it was because of a bunch of factors that were more or less simultaneous but unrelated. One of those being the advent of Euclidean zoning, which was meant to separate out noxious industrial fumes from residential areas and schools by dividing land uses into little pods of activity. This is Bowie, Maryland, perfect example of a pretty horrific land use plan, where everything is kind of segregated out. Industry is in its own little corner, separated from shopping and schools, and you have to get on these arterial roads to go anywhere. Horribly efficient land use. Downtowns have always been mixed use. They've always been ground floor commercial spaces with upper floor offices and apartments and little industries tucked away, and government, entertainment, everything munged together there. Technically illegal now in communities that have Euclidean zoning. Another of these factors was the GI Bill, which in addition to its education component, also had a housing finance component, which made hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars available for new residential construction in, mostly suburban pods outside of city centers. The passage of the Interstate Highway Act in 1956, which made it easier for people to travel farther from town centers to do business or go to work. The growth of the auto industry, which took off in the 1960s. Everybody had to have a car or two. Accelerated depreciation. Anybody here a tax lawyer? Any chance? Accelerated depreciation made it possible for people who invest money in commercial development to write off the depreciation with that for that an investment faster, and that drove hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into new commercial development. The advent of credit cards, making it possible for people to spend more money than they actually have, and even the development of HVAC systems that made it possible to climate control larger and larger buildings. Isn't this just wonderful? It's a whole new day. And voila, sort of as a result of all of these, we began to get suburban enclosed shopping malls popping up around the country. Shopping malls completely changed how retailing takes place. They made it possible for a retailer to sell essentially the same product to essentially the same kind of person anywhere in the country. So once you're inside the mall, you could be in a mall in Bowie, Maryland, or a mall in Sacramento, and you wouldn't know the difference. You would see exactly the same stores, exactly the same merchandise, and pretty much the same kinds of people shopping there. So this is sort of how the scenario goes. We started building these suburbs, and people started moving out into places like this, and Dad would motor into town in the morning to go to work, and Mom would stay home and cook and clean and with her pearls and go slowly crazy in her suburban isolation. Come home and find the kitten boiling on the stove. And as people moved away from town centers, retail followed them. Retail is always a market follower. It is never a market leader. It goes where people are. It puts itself in their path. It's a parasitic industry in that way. And it needed to be where people were. So the first retail that moves out was convenience-oriented stuff, like grocery stores and gasoline, things that you don't want to drive long distances to. You just go to the closest one. But it wasn't too long until we started seeing the regional centers, which saturated a 20 or 30-mile radius for essentially one product line, clothes. Apparel, shoes, jewelry, and some things that keep you shopping for those things longer. Even now, shopping malls, about 85% of what they sell is apparel related. And because they have not one shoe store, but 10 shoe stores, and they have 40 clothing stores, people go there because they like to comparison shop for prices and brands and styles. And so it means basically that there is no market demand left within that radius for those kinds of products and services. And those things largely disappeared from downtowns. This is a graph where you've got like the range of stuff you can buy in the world and the price points at which you can buy it. Shopping malls pretty much captured just this piece, just kind of the clothing, shoes, jewelry piece for middle America. And that piece just evaporated out of downtowns. And we saw the ripple effect, lasting a couple of decades as major department stores began to close. but it just is very hard to put that piece back now. Then these guys came along, big boxes, a decade or two later, again bringing about a big transformation in how retailing occurs and making Sam Walton's family very rich. And big boxes take kind of this piece out of the market. I couldn't make the PowerPoint thing look as blobby as it should be, but it's kind of like this. A huge chunk, and if you can imagine, I'll show it, where the shopping mall pieces overlapping here, you can see why shopping malls are suffering so much and why there are now several thousand dead and dying shopping malls in the country. In my hometown, I grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland in Salisbury, and the shopping mall that killed downtown Salisbury was itself demolished several years ago. And of course, the plan for the great new mixed-use town center that would take its place fell through, and now they have a big parking lot just bought by the Civic Center next door to be a 17-acre surface parking lot.